Welcome to today's webinar. We're going to give folks just a minute or so to enter into the webinar. We'll start in just about a minute. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started as more people join the room. Welcome to today's webinar on understanding and managing our reactions to COVID-19. This webinar is sponsored by the Northeast and Caribbean Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, or MHTTC, housed at Rutgers School of Health Professions, Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation and Counseling Professions. My name is Ann Murphy, and I'm the director of the center, and I'll be facilitating the webinar today. You may also see in the chat box my colleague Kati Rivera, who will be helping to answer technical questions and any questions about the recording of this webinar, etc. Just to give you a little bit of background, the MHTTC is funded by SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, to enhance the capacity of the behavioral health and other related workforces to deliver evidence-based and empirically supported practices to individuals with mental illnesses. We encourage you to visit the MHTTC network website for additional information at mhttcnetwork.org. You can then click on Find My Center, and we are the Northeast and Caribbean. The MHTTC network, as well as our individual center, have a number of recorded webinars, resources, and upcoming events, all related to COVID-19, as well as other topics. So it would be good to go to the website and check out all of those resources. We also encourage you to sign up to be a part of our email listserv. We'd appreciate you following this link and subscribing to receive notices about our upcoming activities, webinars, trainings, and products. Before we begin the webinar, I wanted to quickly review some housekeeping items. We will be sending you a link to a survey via email after the webinar today. We value your feedback and we use it to improve our activities and inform future activities. The surveys are also important because our funder considers the survey as one metric to see how many people are utilizing our services and activities. So we really appreciate you completing those surveys when you receive them. They are very brief. They will take you about 1 to 2 minutes to complete. So if you would be willing to do that, we would really appreciate it. We also wanted to let you know that this webinar is being recorded, and we will post a link to the recording of the webinar as well as the slides to this webinar on our website, and you'll receive a direct link to those in the next couple of days via email. Okay, I did want to just mention a couple things before we move on to today's agenda. This webinar will be interactive. Our presenters will be posing some questions to you, and we encourage you to use the chat feature within Zoom or the Q&A if you prefer to interact with the presenters. So feel free to pose anything in the chat box that you would like to share. I do want to highlight that I believe the chat box defaults to your messages only coming to the presenters and to the facilitators and not to the other attendees. If you would like to post something in the chat that everyone can see, just use the drop-down arrow next to the 2 in the chat box and select panelists and all attendees. That's up to you. And I will turn it over here in just a moment to our presenters, but I do want to just take a second to introduce them. We have 3 presenters who will be speaking today. We have Amy Banco, Giovanna Jacobi, and Brittany Stone. They're all lecturers in the Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation and Counseling Professions at Rutgers School of Health Professions. And we're thrilled to have them with us today. They all have both experience providing clinical services as well as providing training, consultation, and technical assistance services to individuals both in community mental health services and in inpatient psychiatric hospitals. So we're thrilled to have them with us today, and I will turn it over to Amy at this point. Amy?
Thank you so much, Anne, and thank you all for joining us today. Brittany, Giovanna, and I developed this training in conjunction with the MHTTC in hopes of supporting fellow practitioners, peer providers, and counselors in building resiliency when addressing COVID-19 to really help people go from surviving to thriving. So what is resiliency? I know we throw that term around a lot. In the context of exposure to significantly adverse events, resilience is a capacity for individuals to navigate their way through psychological, social, cultural, and physical resources that sustain their well-being. Resiliency is one's ability to utilize supports and knowledge, skills, and resources during a crisis to maintain health and wellness. In disaster mental health counseling, you help people to build resiliency by providing education on the body's response to trauma, to build coping skills, as well as encourage healing through connection. And as you can see for today's session, that is exactly what's on our agenda and our menu. Next slide. So we found an unprecedented need for providing education on how to develop resiliency when navigating COVID-19 because many people, including mental health practitioners, are noting this experience is hard. It's very hard. And we're going to be going over some of the feedback that we received from people on why they think that this experience is so hard. And feel free to utilize your chat box and share with us what makes this experience hard for you. People have shared with Giovanna, Brittany, and I that this is hard because we are faced with such a significant disruption to our lives, to our routine, to how we work, to how we practice as clinicians, to how we congregate or don't congregate as colleagues, friends, family, or as a community. Others have noted that this is hard because we have an abundance of uncertainty, and that's not where we typically thrive. How long will COVID-19 impact our community, our practice? How long will social distancing last? Those are all things that we're grappling with. Some identify that this is hard because we're in an unprecedented health crisis. This is a novel virus that impacts people on such a wide spectrum of symptoms and severity. And so the question, is how might I get sick? Will I get sick? Will a loved one get sick? And what severity would that look like? Additionally, people are concerned, for other reasons for safety, seemingly benign tasks, going to get groceries, obtaining the mail, hugging a friend, visiting a loved one, or conversing with a colleague has all become ways or methods for us to get introduced to this pathogen. Another common reason why people identify this as hard is because we're juggling so many roles simultaneously. We have these reduced boundaries and things kind of overlap. We go from work to school to family life to social life, all in the same setting. And things are tending to bleed and creep in, and we get a feeling that we're managing and juggling these roles and we're not doing any one particularly well. We as practitioners are experiencing collective trauma, and that makes this hard, right? Collective trauma is that we, the helper, are helping someone and we are both simultaneously going through the same crisis. Please remember, as we're going over these barriers and challenges, they can change from one week to the next. In the next week, something may get better, and the next, something may become more of a difficulty. But most of all, we want to emphasize in today's session that we can build skills and tools to reduce our distress. When people are referencing these challenges, you may hear terms used in your conversations like, we're living in a new normal, we're navigating a different landscape, or transitioning to these changes, adjusting to these changes. All of these euphemisms are inadvertently minimizing our experiences and downplaying what this new reality actually is. Next slide. And what our new reality is that we are all doing our best to live through a protracted natural disaster. A disaster follows a crisis or an emergency when people have a disruption in meeting their basic survival needs, or there's serious and immediate threat to human life and well-being. Normal procedures are suspended, and extraordinary measures are taken in order to divert additional crisis or loss of life. Disasters cause trauma, increase distress. They are a time when people are overwhelmed and struggle to function while utilizing their normal coping skills. I mentioned that this is a protracted disaster. What does that mean? Well, disasters are phasic. They happen in 5 phases. From the first phase, which is the impact phase when disaster strikes, to the recovery phase, when the community works together, people come together and connect to rebuild and heal. That first phase that I described, the impact phase, on average lasts from 0 to 48 hours. We are on day 50 of New Jersey's lockdown with no current end in sight. We are all experiencing disaster trauma, which has adverse impact on our psychological functioning and our overall wellness. The reality is no one who experiences a disaster is untouched by it. Giving accurate verbiage to our experience is important, but our main point for this session is to empower you. We want everyone to know that there are things you can do to build resiliency to ensure that you come out of this on the other side, and we will, whole and able to move forward. The first part to building resiliency is to build your knowledge and understanding of how your body reacts to disaster, distress, and traumatic stress. The second part to building resiliency is developing new tools to reduce your distress and draw support from your colleagues, from your supervisors, and other social supports to build further connections. Your reactions to disaster are normal, and we're going to emphasize that a lot today. You are doing all that you can to survive and manage this crisis, and we want to supply you with additional tools to reduce this distress. So let's quickly take a look at the common reactions to crisis and disaster. Next slide. One of the normal reactions to a crisis or trauma are our emotional reactions. Intense emotions are energy depleting. They can divert some of our most precious resources, our finite time and energy, by trying to manage them. These reactions run the spectrum of full emotional range, from numb or apathetic to grief, shame, and guilt. Do any of these emotions resonate with you? If you like, you can share in the chat box some of the emotions that you've been processing. Many times, people may be unaware of the antecedent or triggering factor to feelings, not realizing that it can be related to COVID-19 and the pandemic. Moving forward, we ask that you practice self-compassion. You remind yourself the reasons for the emotions is a traumatic stress and distress related to the pandemic, and to honor that you're doing all that you can with the tools that you have to cope and manage. We will be reviewing a lot today, techniques to assess emotional distress, both in your personal and professional life, as well as techniques that can be used to reduce emotional distress. Next slide. The second domain of reactions to disasters are our physical reactions. Traumatic stress can present physically and is correlated to one's level of hyperarousal. Our body is such a good gauge of our stress level. Your body often will take the brunt of traumatic stress. Physical reactions to traumatic stress and distress frequently include tension in the body that, if held long enough, can result in aches and pains. So go ahead and do a scan of your body right now. Are there areas that you're holding tension? Maybe in your shoulder, your jaw, your arms, or your legs. We'll be learning strategies today to release this tension later and moving forward. Physical reactions of traumatic stress are directly related to our nervous system and how it operates during times of crisis. When we are under traumatic stress, we are flooded with 3 stress hormones: adrenaline, cortisol, and norepinephrine. They regulate our metabolic process, which means that they are involved in the increased heart rate that we experience, or the increased breathing rate, increased blood pressure, even increases in the calories in which we burn, which sounds like a benefit, but in this increase in metabolism, we also have an increase in appetite, and that can cause cravings for sweets, high fatty foods, or salty foods. I know personally my fridge and I are certainly better acquainted since the start of this pandemic. And I know Brittany has shared with me that she is baking more than ever. Her kids love it, Brittany not so much. Additionally, you may have trouble with sleeping. Issues falling asleep is their sleep onset insomnia. Difficulties staying asleep is sleep maintenance insomnia. Or if you're lucky like me, you can experience a mixture of both. Sleep onset insomnia is correlated to hyperarousal and anxiety, while sleep maintenance insomnia has been linked with feelings like sadness or depression. Insomnia that is correlated to an event and is transient is called acute insomnia, meaning that once the stressor is gone, sleep can resume normally. However, since this particular stressor may be present for quite some time, it's important that you utilize the skills we're going to go over today to reduce hyperarousal and bring on the body's relaxation response to initiate or maintain sleep. Next slide. The third domain that is impacted by traumatic stress is cognition. Now you may be asking me, Amy, what does traumatic stress have to do with cognitive functioning? Well, quite a lot actually. Stress and cognition are intertwined. When we are experiencing stress and traumatic stress, we are in a state of hyperarousal. We have less mental energy, less mental flexibility. All of our mental energy and focus gets diverted to survival and navigating that crisis. And then our cognitive functioning is a little more blunted. So let's check in and see if you've been experiencing any of these reactions, and you can share in the chat box if you like. Have you noticed in the last week that you've been reading the same page or sentence over and over again with diminished comprehension? Have you had difficulty composing emails or writing papers or drafting compositions? Difficulty remembering the things. I came in the room for what? Or I know for me, what day is today? Difficulty completing things or tasks taking longer. Loss of motivation to start or finish things. Reduced sense of creativity. Indecisiveness or difficulty in making decisions, increased errors or omissions, or difficulty concentrating during a conversation. I know I'm constantly saying, can you repeat that? You need a lot of physical energy for your cognitive work. And when we are in a constant state of hyperarousal, our energy is reduced. Disruption to cognition can significantly impact your success or satisfaction with work or school and make us feel insecure or vulnerable about our abilities to function in our important roles. We'll be going over ways to reduce some of these reactions. Next slide. The last domain that we're going to go over for disaster reactions are interpersonal reactions. Social distancing has greatly impacted our ability to connect and to benefit from our social capital or our networks. Further compounding this issue is how our relationships and connections can be deterred by these normal interpersonal reactions to disaster and trauma. Be mindful and take inventory of how you're engaging or not engaging with your friends, classmates, colleagues, or family. Are you finding yourself needing more and more alone time? When you're reaching out to others, do you feel people are not responsive? Are you quick to anger or easily irritated, frustrated when chatting or texting or FaceTiming? How are you engaging in your relationships? Differently? The same? Go ahead and share in the chat box if you'd like. As mentioned before, connection is key to the recovery phase of disasters. If we think about other disasters that have occurred in our town or state or country, you'll typically observe people coming together in a sense of unity and solidarity to support the recovery efforts and to collectively heal. And our recovery and healing as counselors, as practitioners, is two-pronged. Next slide. because as mental health providers, as practitioners, we are the helpers. We are clinicians, counselors, peer providers, social workers, therapists who are called to the forefront of this crisis as second responders. We work towards the recovery efforts of our friends, our family, neighbors, community, and states as a whole. But we also need to give time and attention to our own healing and our own self-care. An analogy that is often used is from the pre-flight safety warning in the event of a cabin depressurization in an airplane. During this safety warning, we're reminded to always put on our oxygen mask first before helping others. And this is similar with our own self-care as practitioners during this crisis. As helpers, we need to focus on our self-care because supporting others through this crisis can lead to additional stress, such as vicarious or secondary trauma. Vicarious trauma is an occupational challenge for people working in fields where you're helping others going through crisis or trauma as you begin to take on that traumatic stress yourself. The professional quality of life scale is a tool we're providing you today to assess your level of compassion fatigue, secondary traumatic stress, and burnout. This should be supportive in mitigating vicarious trauma. And let's take a quick peek at that. Next slide. Here is a sample of the ProQoL, our Professional Quality of Life Survey. And in this little snippet of the assessment, you can see that there are statements that are related to the 3 domains of compassion satisfaction, burnout, and secondary trauma. You answer these questions using a Likert scale, and you'll get a score for each domain that will fall in the range of low, average, or high. This tool can be helpful in assessing your wellness as you continue to help others during the COVID-19 crisis. Scoring high in burnout, secondary trauma, or low in compassion satisfaction can be an indicator that you need to incorporate more wellness skills into your routine, or if you haven't already, reach out and speak with someone regarding your own wellness needs. Giovanna is now going to review for us what is happening in our brain when we are experiencing these normal reactions to an abnormal event.
Thanks, Amy. So how does our brains process trauma? One of the main functions of our body is to keep us alive. In order to keep us protected, our body has certain automatic reflexes that turn on when we feel threatened. These automatic reflexes come from our brain and nervous system. Today, we will learn about how these automatic reflexes protect us and affect us, not just physically, but emotionally and cognitively as well. By learning about how they affect us, we will be better prepared to respond and control them. Next slide. At a biological level, we are created to survive. Survival mode is a fear-based response to threat and stress. COVID-19 is a major threat to all our lives and has caused an upheaval to our entire way of living, to our work, home, socialization, shopping, school, running errands, and many other things. Really, it's an entire shift to the whole world, which feels overwhelming and frightening. This makes our body automatically respond to this threat and puts our body into the survival mode. In this mode, we may feel many things Amy described. We have emotional reactions like feeling afraid, angry, or sad. Physical reactions like feeling tense, tired, or not sleeping very well. We can have interpersonal issues, feeling irritable with people, loss of intimacy, or withdrawing from others, and also cognitive problems like trouble concentrating, difficulty making decisions, feeling easily confused. What I do want to say is that these are all normal reactions to stress and threat, and they're happening in our brains and nervous system. By understanding and learning about these reactions and where they come from, we can begin to prepare ourselves to handle and control them better. And they won't feel so overwhelming and out of control. Next slide. So let's begin to understand our reactions, emotions, and how we think a little better. As humans, we have 3 parts to our brain that control these things: the reptilian brain, the limbic brain, and the neocortex that I will describe in more detail and try to make connections to. So let's start at the base of our brain, That's the reptilian brain, or the brainstem. This is the part of the brain that reacts quickly and automatically to danger, kind of like a lizard running and darting away from possibly getting eaten by something. We too have this quick reaction built in to protect us from danger, like moving our hand quickly away from a hot stove, reacting quickly to a garden hose that for a quick second appeared to be a dangerous snake, and many other automatic reactions we take for granted. If something is interpreted by our brain as dangerous, we automatically respond. This is not conscious, but rather a biological one that protects our survival. The second part of our brain is the limbic brain, or the limbic system. Sometimes it's referred to as the mammalian brain. This brain we share with other mammals like cats, dogs, monkeys. This part of our brain that is responsible for our feelings and emotions. This is where we feel fear, happiness, anger, and many other basic emotions that we share with other mammals. The limbic system and brainstem actually work together to keep us alive, and they respond to traumatic events. So, also located in this limbic brain is where our body's alarm system is located, and it is called the amygdala. Did you know we had an alarm system built into our brains? It is quite fascinating, and to be honest, it's pretty cool to me. It is very sensitive to picking up threat and danger in our environment, and it immediately sets off an alarm that coordinates many parts of our body to react. We don't cognitively make this decision to set off the alarm, but rather it is our brain that senses danger and it automatically responds. This is why at times our emotions can feel so overwhelming and out of control to us. Now, the third part of our brain is called the neocortex. Some people call it the prefrontal cortex. This is the area of the brain that makes us special and human. We do share this part of the brain with other primates like monkeys and gorillas, but ours is a little bigger. This is the part of the brain that is responsible for thinking, rationalizing, reasoning, organizing information. Part of our imagination is there, language, abstract thinking, and so many other things that make us uniquely human. The really interesting aspect of this part of the brain is in its relationship to trauma and our COVID-19 experiences. Our human brain actually shuts off, and it is hard to access when that amygdala turns on and our sympathetic nervous system starts working. So when we feel scared or anxious and the amygdala sounds the alarm, our neocortex, that front part of the brain, the human part, it actually stops working. This is why it's so hard for many of us to think clearly during this crisis. It's difficult to make decisions, organize, concentrate, and so many other things we take for granted. Next slide. So, how does our brain and body respond to threat? Our brain is designed to protect us from danger. So what makes that alarm, also known as the amygdala, go off? It is normally something in our environment that triggers us. We see something, we hear something, smell something, feel something. Well, with feeling something is like maybe like a bug crawling on us, and we automatically react to avoid getting bitten, or even taste something, say rotten fruit, and you spit it out to avoid getting sick from like food poisoning. These are automatic reflexes that protect our body. So as soon as our brain picks up something threatening in our environment, that alarm goes off. This is not something we choose, but rather something that happens automatically to help us survive. When this automatic response happens in our body, we actually feel it. Your heart will start to beat faster. Your breathing will change either by like holding your breath, or you'll be breathing faster. You might start sweating. Your muscles might start to tense up or tighten, or you may even feel butterflies in your stomach. When you feel these things, we know that we're feeling threatened or frightened by something in our environment. So let's discuss how our brain and body is reacting to COVID at this time. At this time, we're constantly bombarded with COVID-19 related stuff, seeing it, hearing it on the news and social media. We get breaking news daily, death reports daily. It's all over Facebook and Instagram. Family, friends, neighbors are talking about it every day. It's really difficult to avoid. We also have other triggers in our environment, like seeing people wearing masks, gloves, keeping social distancing, being afraid to touch someone or something in our environment. For some people, just hearing an ambulance can trigger a fear response that is connected to COVID. By understanding this, we can control and contain our emotions a little better. I encourage you to take a look and identify your triggers so you can begin to manage them better. Feel free to share your triggers in the chat below. They might actually resonate with some people. Our bodies are constantly picking up all these small cues that may seem insignificant, but these cues are telling our bodies danger exists and it's reacting, which is putting us in a chronic state of survival mode. Next slide. So how does trauma impact our autonomic nervous system? So the reptilian brain and the limbic brain, or some people refer to it as the limbic system, work automatically together to keep us alive. But there's another system that alerts us, and that's called the autonomic nervous system. This system also runs automatically without control. It regulates our heartbeat, blood pressure, digestion, and so many other things to keep our body alive and running smoothly. Actually, there are two parts to this system. There's the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. They work together to regulate each other. To explain this easily, let's think of them like pedals on a car. The sympathetic nervous system, it's our gas pedal. It gives us energy. And the parasympathetic nervous system is the brake and helps us to feel more in control. So, say we're speeding down a highway. We're pressing that gas, maybe pressing that gas a little too much, and out of nowhere, a deer jumps in front of us, and we immediately step on that brake to avoid hitting the deer. That brake is what helps us to maintain control and keep us safe. This is important to understand if we want to better control them. So, the sympathetic nervous system, our gas pedal, it's actually responsible for our flight and fight. It's what makes us, it's what makes our heart race, our muscles tense, becoming ready to either run for our lives or fight off our attacker. So when we feel fearful, anxious, our heart is racing, butterflies in our stomach, or any other uncomfortable body reaction, we know the sympathetic nervous system is in charge. This is important to note because by knowing this, we can begin to take control over it and use methods to put on that brake. Normally, what we want is homeostasis or balance and to feel in control of our body. We want to know that we can put on the brake and turn that parasympathetic nervous system on. When the parasympathetic nervous system is turned on, we feel more in control, we can think more clearly, and we even feel more social. Actually, did you know that being socially connected to the right people can help to turn this system on, that parasympathetic nervous system? That's why you usually feel better after talking to a good friend or even a therapist. That connection with others can turn the parasympathetic nervous system on. That's our brake. There are also other things we can do to turn on our parasympathetic nervous system, like breathing exercises, actively engaging in mindfulness practices, like using your 5 senses, yoga and exercise can turn it on, and also guided imagery. These all help turn on that brake system, which helps make us feel a little more in control of our emotions and physical reactions. We will learn all these things later in this webinar. Next slide, please. So again, COVID-19 has put us into survival mode. In survival mode, we go into these automatic responses, which is fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or even faint. So let's just talk about them. With fight, which is our automatic response to physically attack or confront aggressively. COVID-19 is difficult to physically fight since it's this invisible threat in our environment. But some of us, we may act out aggressively with others or feel really on edge and get into verbal arguments more easily. It is our nervous system feeling under this threat and automatically responding to stimuli. So we may easily become irritated, frustrated, or even blow up more easily on a friend or a family member. This is because our sympathetic nervous system is turned on and we are in this fight mode. Now with flight, that's when we either can run or flee. This is probably not something that is accessible to our sympathetic nervous system around the COVID-19 crisis at this time. And many of us actually probably feel trapped because we must stay home due to these social distancing restrictions. This is where we see some people go into fight mode. An example of this is people organizing protests and fighting the threat that they feel has been imposed on them because many feel trapped and can't act. Our body needs to feel like it can act and respond freely, but we all feel confined. Some people's nervous system might respond also in like a more passive way. This is through freeze mode. You feel like you're paralyzed or like you can't move. I heard many family, friends, and colleagues feel this way. Our system is overwhelmed and doesn't know what to do with all this information and fear. And since it can't fight or run, it is forced into paralyzing states. Also fawn, like you either comply or you feel like you're hiding, you need to hide, and then faint. You actually lose consciousness. Can any of you relate to these states of being where you find yourself stuck in fight mode, fleeing? Some of us have this desire to get in the car and just drive, or freeze or fawn, when we feel paralyzed by fear or just want to hide. Feel free to comment in the chat your thoughts on this information. Next slide. So why is it so difficult to think during this time? Again, when the sympathetic nervous system is turned on, our prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that makes us human, is no longer connected and doesn't work very well. That part of the brain, we need to turn it on in order to think clearly, reason, and make good judgments. What we really need to do to help ourselves to think better is to turn the parasympathetic nervous system on. This is what will make us feel more relaxed, more in control, and will help us to concentrate and think clearly. In a little bit, Amy and I are going to provide you with ways to turn that parasympathetic nervous system on so you feel more relaxed and in control of your emotions, reactions, and thoughts. But right now, Brittany is going to address some strategies to further help with your thinking, concentrating, and accessing the prefrontal cortex. Next slide.
Hi, everyone. As Amy said earlier, you need a lot of physical energy to do this cognitive work. And just to be able to get through our day, right? To write our progress notes, to be present for other people. We're doing so much worrying and so much rumination that it sucks up a lot of our energy, resulting in us being less productive, having memory difficulty, things taking much longer than they usually do. We might find ourselves, aimlessly scrolling on our phone, more prone to, having our attention pulled away. We might decide that we've needed to reorganize a closet that has been a mess since we moved in 7 years ago, but that has to get done immediately. So all of these things are connected to our executive functions. And you can see on this really full slide down the first column are some of our common executive functions. What these are is just, executive function is an umbrella term for the cognitive processes that help with thought and action. So in that column, there's a list of some common ones. And then next to it is some of the things that we might be having trouble with. So planning, for example, might cause trouble with punctuality, preparing for appointments, meeting due dates and deadlines, or even estimating how long certain tasks take to complete. Moving into the third column, these are some support strategies. and support strategies that we might need to pull in other people for. This could be in the form of accommodations or just using the people around us, our colleagues, our supervisors, our family members to help with these. And then in the final column, there are additional compensatory strategies, personal strategies, things that you could do or try to start implementing. Now, prior to COVID, we might not have had problems with planning or reasoning. We might have been able to manage our attention a little bit better or inhibit automatic responses. We might have had no issue with memory. Because of everything that's going on with the added stress and the added cognitive pull on us, we might need to try some new things. We might need to incorporate some strategies that we haven't had to use before. Perhaps it's writing things down and using to-do lists, or implementing something like the WISE choice model for decision making so that we can really make informed decisions rather than emotional ones. So you can go ahead and take a look at this slide. All of these things will be emailed to you. There's some links in here with YouTube videos or other resources to help connect you to this information. We don't have too much time to go into each one of these, but if you want additional information, feel free to reach out and let us know and we can get you some of that. But take notice over the next couple days and weeks. Are you having difficulty in one or more of these areas? And then which support strategies might be the right one for you to try? Start to try to implement them, watch one of these videos, see if it's a technique that might work for you. Additionally, in the resource section of this presentation, you can find a connection to the Job Accommodation Network. They're a really wonderful support that can help think through what types of accommodations might be best in your workplace. So now we're going to shift and start to talk about turning on that parasympathetic nervous system by eliciting the relaxation response. Next slide, please. So if you have any questions about any of the things that we've mentioned thus far, please go ahead and put that in the chat box and we'll be able to address those at the end. So now that we have an understanding of what's happening in our body, what's happening in our brain, why we're having difficulty in places that we might not have had difficulty before, we're going to start to come up with some of those strategies. Before we get to the strategies, though, I want to introduce you to something called the SUDS. Next slide, please. This is the subjective units of distress measure. Right now, people are experiencing unprecedented mental health concerns. Next slide, please. Thank you. People are seeing an increase in symptoms. They're experiencing more distress than usual. People without a previous history of mental health conditions might be experiencing some of these things for the first time, right? So we might be seeing an increase in symptoms of anxiety, of depression. All of that is compounded because we're not able to pull from our normal coping techniques. We might not be able to access our family and friends as support. We might not be able to get to different meetings or the gym or other things that we did to maintain our own wellness. And then we have these very legitimate health and safety concerns and potentially some negative coping skills that we've been incorporating. So this subjective units of distress scale is a way to measure the intensity of distress or nervousness that you're experiencing. It's an assessment tool that uses a 0 to 10 rating, 0 being peace and complete calm, and 10 is unbearably upset to the point where you cannot function. So I want you to take a look at this now and think about where you are today. We're going to start talking about some of these techniques, and then when we're finished going over some of them, we're going to have you look at it again. When you're incorporating new strategies and new techniques for wellness, using something like the SUDS is a great way to start to assess what works and what doesn't work for you. It also is really helpful to be able to get a baseline of where you are and notice if you're able to bring it down. If you're not able to bring it down, perhaps then you can go and seek some professional support, talk to a support person. And just to be able to say, you know, this is where I've been, this is what's going on, this is what works, this is what hasn't worked for me. That way you're able to track your progress and success with what's working and what isn't. So go ahead and take a second now to just get a sense of where you are today, where you are right now. All right, next slide, please. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is social engagement and the role of social connection. This, as we know, is well documented in mental health and recovery literature. In fact, it's included as one of the 8 dimensions of wellness, which is a holistic model of recovery endorsed by SAMHSA. In the context of trauma and PTSD, most of us might not immediately consider the importance of this social support. Both research and clinical narratives show that it's really crucial for people who have survived trauma. It's also a protective factor for PTSD. So given the importance of social support and the role it plays in our wellness, how do we maintain social engagement while social distancing? And how do we engage with our community when we can't physically be present in our community? So we want to try to find ways that are going to work for us to meet this need for social engagement and social connection. And it's going to look pretty different than it did 50-something days ago when this stay-at-home order went into place. Right? We can't go out for coffee with a colleague. We can't attend live AA meetings or spend a day, at a Broadway theater. You can't go to the gym. So how are we preventing our own isolation, loneliness, and a whole host of other unhealthy coping strategies? So in the chat box, I would love to hear what you're doing, what you've found to stay well. For some people, it might be that they're making masks or donating food to responders and hospital workers, picking up groceries for immune-compromised neighbors. It could be taking a yoga class via Zoom or attending a virtual church service, looking up AA meetings that are held virtually, doing a Netflix party with friends or a virtual game night on Zoom, doing Disney sing-alongs, doing virtual aquarium visits or doodles with artists. The important thing is that we're trying to schedule something and making a commitment. I know for a lot of us, we might feel so exhausted by the end of the day that it's draining to pick up the phone. Try to schedule it. Try to make one social connection per day. That's not necessarily a work engagement. Think about what brings you joy and what brings you happiness, and how can that be incorporated in this remote way. Right? I see somebody is saying getting out into nature, dropping off care packages. Wonderful. All right, next slide, please. So the next component of this social connection and social engagement is really nurturing the relationships that we have. As Amy and Giovanna discussed, some of the side effects of what's going on is that we might be more irritable. We might be having strained relationships right now. So we want to make sure that we're cultivating healthy relationships and we're nurturing these relationships as a way to get our physical and emotional needs met. Here are some good questions to be able to check in with your loved ones. If you're noticing that they're getting a little snippy or getting, pulling away, pulling back, asking, how do you feel? What do you need? And how can we work together so that we can meet these needs in healthy ways? Or you can give the option, do you want me to listen? Do you want me to get involved? Do you want me to give advice or support? So finding out what the person needs before reacting in an unhealthy way. Once our partner, our family member, our friends, when they're able to open to us, when we're able to have these conversations, we want to try to frame how we're viewing it, right? We can choose to view it as a burden, or we can choose to view it as an honor and express gratitude for that. We want to establish the practice of routinely expressing gratitude to the people in our lives, especially when we kind of feel like we're living in a pressure cooker, right? We're all on top of each other all the time. By doing these small acts, taking a moment to say thank you for cleaning the toilet, thank you for bringing me my cup of coffee. Those small things can foster a chain reaction of positive feelings and reciprocal acts of kindness, right? Which can then reinforce the positive relationships and positive connections. Gratitude can be a really powerful tool as well to strengthen our social connections, but it can also be really transformative in a number of other ways. Next slide, please. Thank you. So numerous studies show that daily gratitude can have a powerful impact on our mental and our physical health. Researchers have found that gratitude was a protective factor for individuals who witnessed the 9/11 attacks. Also, that combat veterans with higher levels of gratitude experience lower rates of PTSD. It's also been linked to lower blood pressure, lower levels of the stress hormone cortisol, and stronger immune system responses. And this is thought to be because having these positive emotions of appreciation activates the parasympathetic nervous system to counter that fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. That's responsible for driving up our heart rate, our blood pressure, our respiration, all of those things that Amy and Giovanna have discussed. So here are some strategies and some ways that you can incorporate gratitude in the daily practice of gratitude. Journaling is the first one. And we don't want to be picky with gratitude. It could be something small. It could be that you saw a really cool bird in the bird feeder outside, or that you got to enjoy your coffee or your tea hot in the morning. So it could be small things. So writing down some things that you're noticing throughout the day. Using prompts. There's a link here for 100 prompts, and you could do one a day, one prompt a day. 3 people in your life that you're grateful for. 3 things that made you smile. 3 movies that made you laugh. You can also do a gratitude jar where you can just take a jug or a jar that you find in your home, cut little scraps of paper, and as things are going throughout the day, you can jot down notes, stick them in the jar. You can get your whole family involved in that as well. You can do a gratitude tree where you're collecting sticks and branches and cutting leaves out from paper if you're crafty, and make trees or flowers and write on the petals or on the leaves things that you're grateful for. You can do a gratitude walk where you're pairing that with a grounding activity where you're thinking about, what are 5 things that I can see? What are 4 things that I can hear? 3 that I can touch? I apologize for the noise. As you know, we're all, working from home, so you might hear my kids playing downstairs. 2 things that you're able to smell and 1 thing that you're able to taste. So you can do that to connect with nature when you're getting out there. It helps you to be more present. And get your family involved, your team, your roommates, the people, your colleagues, the people that you're around. But just pick something to make it part of your routine and see if that is able to make a difference in what your outlook is. Even in the midst of a pandemic, finding something to be grateful for can help to prevent this prolonged stress reaction. It's not always easy to keep up our mental state of being thankful and appreciative, but by noticing some of these small things, it can be a really simple thing to incorporate. We also want to start to notice our thought patterns, especially the automatic thoughts that creep in. Next slide, please. We know that our brain has powerful impacts on our body in the way we're processing information, interpreting stimuli, the reactions it's producing, the thoughts that we're generating. These thoughts are shaped and conditioned by our experiences, our past, our present ones, our perspective on life, our emotional state, the people around us. And those thoughts and how we talk to ourselves frame how we look at life. And it frames how we might act toward other people. And unfortunately, sometimes, especially in these acute stress states, our internal monologue can be negative. So how many of us tend to ruminate on small missteps or are quick to harshly judge our own performance, right? We kind of beat ourselves up, or we'll be laying in bed at night, unable to get to sleep, and we'll be thinking about something awkward that we did or said from years ago that nobody else probably gives another thought to. And these are things that we would usually never say to a friend or a family member, right? We would never judge other people as harshly as we judge ourselves in a lot of instances. We want to start developing an awareness of what our self-talk is and how that impacts our wellness. When feelings of stress, panic, anxiety start to creep in, it can be like looking through a dirty window. It's distorting what's in front of us. Listening to that negative self-talk spinning through our head can increase anxiety and depressed mood. So we want to start to correct this or try to correct it. And the first step in doing that is to listen to ourselves. What are we saying? When that negative self-talk goes unchecked, it can lead to patterns of distorted thought called cognitive distortions. And these are subtle. They're biased thoughts and beliefs that we've usually reinforced over time, where we give ourselves these same messages. Overgeneralization is one example of it. Where we've got we come to a quick conclusion based on one incident or one piece of information. So how many of you have bombed an interview in the past, right? You bomb that one interview and then all of a sudden I'm terrible at interviewing, I'm never going to get a job. Another is polarized thinking, this black or white thinking. And the first statement on this slide is an example of that. Being stuck at home is awful. So there's no subtlety there. No shade of gray. I'm, a failure or it's perfect. Once we're able to start to recognize what some of these things are, we have the opportunity to choose to look at the situation a little bit differently and begin to challenge these things. Do we have evidence for it or against it? Do I have evidence, that can refute it? Then we're able to reframe that self-talk or the thoughts that we're having. If we do have evidence for it, we can use that growth mindset, that resilience, and develop a plan for approaching the challenge. So, for example, I'm not good at this. Can we reframe that? I'm still learning. I'll find a strategy that works for me. Can we be a little bit gentler on ourselves when we're assessing some of these thoughts? Or can we approach it with gratitude? So this third example, my professor tore up my paper. How many times has that happened, right? So perhaps looking at it, my professor was being overly enthusiastic about providing me feedback. It's hard to hear, but it will make me a better writer. Or my professor knows I want to go on to grad school, and that's why they're being really difficult. So how can we reframe some of these things? The being stuck at home, I finally got to crack open that cookbook I bought in 2011. So we want to be able to recognize and reframe these patterns. This does take some skill and some practice. It's not going to happen overnight. We want to be patient with ourselves about it. But for now, again, keep it simple. Try to recognize what these negative thoughts are that are creeping in. Can you spin it? Can you reframe it? Can you approach it and pair it with gratitude? If you'd like more information about any of this information, again, please reach out, let us know. You can let us know in the chat. And there are a whole bunch of different resources at the end that you can pull from too. There are some apps and some links to other sites for a lot of these things. So now we're going to move on into some of our other techniques, our breathing and our guided meditation. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Brittany. So we're going to go into a breathing exercise. This breathing exercise will help us calm our sympathetic nervous system down. That's that gas pedal, and help us to brake to feel more in control, which turns that parasympathetic nervous system on and allows us to feel calmer. I'm sure many of you have tried breathing exercises, but are not really sure why they work or how they work. Well, when our breathing is heavy or shallow or even out of control, we know that the sympathetic nervous system is turned on. It's putting us into that fight or flight. One way to calm it down is to just simply use our breath to put on that brake. Our breathing is actually connected to our nervous system. Normally, we don't even think about how we breathe or monitor it, but it is one key way to controlling our emotions. The one thing I want to point out is that it is the exhale that relaxes us, not the inhale. I know many people have been told to take a deep breath in, but it's really the exhale that relaxes us. The inhale actually turns on the sympathetic nervous system, and your exhale turns on the parasympathetic nervous system, which is that brake system. So for this exercise, I really want you to focus on your exhale and make it longer than your inhale. An easy way to do this is when you breathe out, pretend like you're breathing out through a straw. So please get into a comfortable position. Just giving everybody a few seconds to get into that comfortable position. So we will begin with one hand on your heart and one hand on your chest. Please refer to my picture on the slide. So let me just explain. We're doing this for two reasons. Touching your chest actually begins to connect the parasympathetic nervous system. And the hand on the belly also allows us to feel physically connected to our body. And we'll feel our belly and chest rise and fall during our breaths. And that makes us feel more connected to ourselves and the present moment, which actively engages that parasympathetic nervous system. Next slide. So the heart is here for a visual to help us connect our breathing. What it's going to do soon is it's going to beat. So it's going to move towards us and away from us. So when the heart moves towards us, we will breathe in. And when it moves away from us, we will breathe out, kind of like we're blowing it away through that straw. Remember, we'll take a normal breath in through our nose for 4 seconds and a longer breath out through our mouth by blowing that beating heart away. Let's practice this for the next few seconds. And you can turn the heart on and the music. So again, when you see the heart coming in towards us, we're going to breathe in. And when it moves away, you're going to breathe out like you're breathing through a straw. So let's practice. So breathe in. And then breathe out through that straw and push that heart away. Again, breathe in. And breathe out. Breathe in. And breathe out. I'm going to allow you guys to do this to yourselves for a few more seconds. And if you can stop the music. Okay, so now let's bring our awareness back to our room. So I would love to keep going with this, but we have some more tools to share. Please feel free to use the chat box to tell us how you felt using this exercise. How did this exercise make you think about your own breathing and its connection to stress? Did it help? Was it not helpful? And please tell us why. Also, when do you think it would be helpful to use such a breathing exercise during your day? So let's move to another exercise that induces the relaxation response. Amy is going to introduce another activity that helps you to imagine a safe place.
Thank you, Giovanna. Oh, the music came back. I've actually used that exercise with my little guy. He's 10, and it's been weighing on him, you know, COVID-19 and loss of connection with friends and just being inside. And so I've modified it a little bit where we blow out birthday candles. I had taught him to breathe in and then to, as I hold up my hand and my fingers, to breathe out and blow out the candles. And that's helped quite a bit. So thank you, Jay. The next exercise that we're going to look at is a guided imagery technique. Guided imagery is a visual meditation that incorporates the senses and induces this relaxation response. It helps to create harmony between the mind and the body by encouraging peace and calm. Guided imagery asks you, the participant, to invoke your imagination, your senses, and your thoughts to focus on a safe place all of your own. My safe place when I use this technique is my grandmother's house, because it always brings this sense of peace and calm, and it has such vivid images in terms of her flowers in the backyard and her wind chimes, as well as her baking that I can smell. Over the past 40 years, the effectiveness of guided imagery has been validated by research demonstrating its positive impact on health, wellness, attitude, behavioral change, as well as performance. Less than 10 minutes of guided imagery can reduce stress, blood pressure, respiratory rate, and cholesterol level. It can heighten short-term immune cell activity and speed up healing. And guided imagery lowers anxiety and pain. Regular use of guided imagery can heighten access to emotional depth, to humor, responsiveness to music, spirituality, creativity, abstract thinking, and empathy, right? It turns on that parasympathetic nervous system. So let's go ahead and get ourselves in a comfortable position. To begin this guided meditation, relax in your seat and release any tension you may feel in the body. Close your eyes. Let your body begin to relax by releasing any areas of tension with your breath. Take a slow, deep breath in, and as you exhale, let the tension go. As you do this, allow yourself to picture in your mind's eye a safe place. What is the first place that comes to mind? What type of place does your mind choose as a safe place? Maybe you are in a beautiful garden, or in the mountains, or in an open field, or the beach. Picture this place. Consider the feeling of calm and safety and serenity washing over you. Breathe in and breathe out. Imagine the details of your safe place. Notice the sky, the scenery. Maybe there's foliage. What are your safe place colors and hues? What season is it in your safe place? Notice the ground. Is it earthy, soil, rocky, sandy? Are you barefoot? What does the ground of your safe place feel like beneath your feet? Breathe in and breathe out. What smells do you notice in your safe place? Is it sweet, salty, floral, earthy? Are there birds overhead? If so, listen to their singing. Breathe in and breathe out. What other sounds do you hear in your safe place? Let these sounds lull you peacefully. Notice if there's a breeze or wind. What does it feel like on your face or your body? Is it warm or cool? Allow yourself to take in all of these senses, feeling calm, serene, and peaceful. Breathe in and breathe out. Now look around you. Notice a bench or a rock or tree stump in your place, and go take a seat. Feel the sun warming you and further relaxing you. Breathe in the warmth and vibrancy of the sun, allowing it to fill you with a sense of calm and peace from the top of your head to the tips of your toes. Breathe in and breathe out. Notice as you become part of your safe place that you feel a little more rested, a little more relaxed, and a little more at peace. Breathe in and breathe out. After you have thoroughly visualized this place and you are ready to leave, allow yourself to come back into the room and leave your safe place for now, knowing you can return to your safe place anytime you like. Open your eyes and take a few moments to experience the joy and the residual feelings of your safe place. Breathe in and breathe out. Your safe place is available to you whenever you need to go there. And this is, again, one example of a script of guided imagery that was pulled from Babbitt Rothschild. Brittany is now going to lead us through our next SUDS. Please be mindful that you can pull additional guided imagery scripts as well as recordings off of our resource list so that someone recorded can walk you through the same type of experience. Brittany?
Thank you, Amy and Giovanna. That was very relaxing. So I hope one of those activities worked for you and you were able to connect with it. Start to think about how you can incorporate these things throughout your day, make them part of your routine. So now that we've completed these 2 exercises, I want you to take another look at the subjective units of distress at the SUDS. Let's assess your distress now. So think about where you were prior to starting these 2 activities and where are you now? Have you noticed a change? How does your body feel? What's your frame of mind? If you don't notice anything now, that's okay. I would encourage you to try these again. Incorporate them into your day, perhaps when you're not on a Zoom training, when you can go sit in nature, when you can go sit in quiet, when you can be in a comfortable position. So think about what works for you, what doesn't work for you. Try to build these things in and see if it's able to reduce your SUDS. No matter what strategies you choose to use, try to remember to come back and do this activity, the SUDS, before and after. It can be helpful to you personally, but also in conversations with loved ones and with providers. If you feel your distress continuing to climb, if you notice as you're doing these things that your level of distress is not coming down and it's starting to hover up above a 6, you might want to consider reaching out to a provider or an expert. On this slide, you'll notice that there is the crisis text line. You can text 741-741 and be instantly connected with a crisis counselor. There's also the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline number posted here too. That will provide you with free and confidential support. In the slides below this one that you'll receive when you get the PowerPoint, you'll notice that there are a number of curated resources to help with wellness, with safety, with strategies and supports to help manage and identify your reaction to COVID, to be able to help you to maintain your wellness so that you're able to better help other people to stay well. So if you have any questions or want to include anything else in the chat, you can go ahead and do so now. We thank you for joining us today in this session. I know it was a lot of information packed into a really short time. The 3 of us could easily spend hours talking about any number of these topics. So if there's something you want more information about, please let us know. Thank you again so much for joining us.
Okay, so we've got a little bit of time left. So if you have any questions for the presenters, I'll click through some of the resource pages so you can see them, and you'll also receive them via email. But if you have any questions for the presenters, we do have some time now. for you to ask them. So please feel free to type them in the chat box. I saw a question earlier talking about, at the very beginning, talking about some of the challenges people are having in working with the clients that they work with, in terms of a loss of motivation on the client's part to pursue goals. I think, Brittany, you addressed it a little bit in the chat box, but I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about applying some of these strategies with folks that people on the call might be working with, especially through a telehealth kind of approach.
Great. Thank you, Anne. Yeah, that was a really wonderful question. The first step, I think, is identifying that these are normal responses, that it's really hard to work on goal-directed behavior when we have all of these really present-day fears and concerns bearing down on us. For a lot of people, it might be during this time shifting the focus of what the goals are. Perhaps it's looking at more present day things, focusing more on wellness strategies than doing some of that future planning. Now, this is going to be different for everyone. Some people are going to want to continue to look for employment or work on long-term goals, but for some of us, it's really focusing on staying well and staying healthy in the day-to-day. Helping people to set up daily habits and daily routines is another place that we might want to be working on. What do those goals look like? What are our daily goals? What are our weekly goals? It's hard to think about what are our goals 3 months out, 6 months out, when we don't know what the world is going to look like, at that time period. So engaging people, having new conversations about what do you need right now? How can I best serve you and support you right now? And letting people know that it's okay if they're not thinking about those far out goals, those goals farther into the future. Doing a lot of this psychoeducation with people is helpful too, letting them know that this is a hard time and that these things are pulling their attention, their cognitive energy away. And then being able to teach strategies to manage some of those day-to-day things. Sometimes when we're able to do those small steps in each day, we're able to build upon that to create bigger movement.
I think too, Brittany, your answer is very much bathed in that lens of motivational interviewing counseling, where we meet people where they're at, right? And look at what is it the person wants to work on most and primarily. Is it that wellness, or are we looking at those overall rehabilitation goals related to their treatment plan? And if they are not able, willing, or desiring to work on those goals, and we as practitioners try to push them in that particular direction, that's where we see that what we would classify as like resistance or people not wanting to engage in counseling services. So to really meet people where they're at, and to, if you have training in motivational interviewing, to use those counseling techniques, those decisional balances and such. I know the MHTTC offers a ton of trainings on motivational interviewing that you could pull into these types of sessions, because so many people are experiencing that concern with motivation and commitment.
Thank you, Amy and Brittany. I do see we've gotten another question here about tips for re-entering the community with your clients as the pandemic declines. Do you all have any thoughts about that?
I think that's going to be heavily regulated by the state, as well as hopefully the science. When we are going to eventually get back to face-to-face sessions, that will really be influenced by what's going on in terms of legislation, opening back up certain areas. I'm sure there'll be steps in place to, whether it's, wearing masks or getting access to more testing. So we really don't have too much information on what that's going to look like. But I do anticipate as that process begins, we'll be developing trainings to help navigate people through it.
And I think we want to keep in mind too the comfort level of the people that we're working with. Some people are going to be very eager to rush back out and be in the community. And other people might approach it with more fear or anxiety. So again, remembering wellness strategies and remembering that individualized approach to meeting people where they are.
Yeah, I think if I can also chime in on this, and we have another question about how to help peers face fears due to the pandemic. You know, I think one of the challenges around this is, you know, there's legitimacy to people's concerns and anxiety and fears in terms of integrating back into the community, or, you know, getting back out into the community. So I think some of the challenges, both the people that we work with might have anxiety, but we might have anxiety as well. And so really trying to, you know, let the people we work with take the lead in terms of how much they want to do, how far they want to go, what they feel safe with. And I think, you know, as best you can, the same thing for yourself in working with your employer and your agency to try to make the safest and best decisions around how to do that. It is certainly a challenging time, and there's not 100% clarity on when is the best time, what is the best way, etc. So I think if we can all be take our time and be gentle with ourselves and with the people we're working with, that's probably the best we can do as we continue to learn more. Anything else? I don't see any other questions at this moment. Amy, Brittany, or Giovanna, is there any last minute comments you want to make?
I just want to thank everyone for attending and participating today. If you need any additional information or resources, please don't hesitate. We are, you know, just so eager to be able to provide information, support, and services to help practitioners and providers build that resiliency. We're invested in that. Again, thank you for coming, and we look forward to additional opportunities to support you in the work that you're doing.
Thank you. So the MHTTC also wants to thank our presenters for their wonderful presentation. I do want to also alert you that we do have some resources on our website, some kind of 2-page info guides, both for providers and mental health organizations, and also a separate guide that you can provide to people that you work with or other people in the general community. So feel free to check those things out. We'll include a link in the email that we send to you. So thank you very much for coming. Certificates of attendance will be emailed to you following the webinar today. Give us a day or two to get those out to you, as well as links to the recording, the PowerPoint slides, etc. So thank you again to our presenters and also to all of you for attending. We really appreciate it. Thanks so much. Be safe and have a good day.